the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Welcome to Week 10, ladies and gentlemen, for your fantasy football leagues. It is Fantasy Football Night in America right here on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman, and this is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the FFPC. I can be followed on the X Machine at Eric Balkman. Of course, you know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and the FFPC as well. My guest tonight, guest co-host for the next 2 hours, taking you into Thursday Night Football between it's going to be the juggernaut of the Panthers and the Bears tonight. This guy's a juggernaut in the industry at not J Daigle on the X. Of course, you check out all his work at 4for4.com. John Daigle, welcome aboard, man. So glad to have you again on the show.
Glad to be back. I know you like to rotate all of your guests, so it usually takes us a day or two to figure out a scheduling time, but we found one. We picked the most exciting Thursday Night Football game to enter in for everybody, so here we are.
You know, and we'll get into that, by the way. We have a jam-packed show tonight. We're going to get you up to speed on everything you need to know about waivers and submitting your lineups for Week 10. We're going to get into the BettorCast coming up in the second segment here in the first hour. We're going to break down what you need to be doing on the BettorCast tonight, which I will encourage everybody to download the BettorCast app for free in the App Store and Google Play right now so you can participate in that with us. And you can have a fun time tonight hanging out on the BettorCast with all the BSN luminaries and BSN fans that we'll have on the show tonight. John's going to help me set or on the network, I should say. John's going to help me set all my pregame questions involving Chuba Hubbard, Adam Thielen, Bryce Young, and many more tonight. So that'll be coming up in the bottom half of this hour. The second hour, we're going to lead off, and we'll find out where John stands on certain players like Keaton Mitchell, like Quentin Johnston, Brock Purdy, and much more. And then we'll cap it off with some start or sits involving Cade Otton, James Cook, Demario Douglas, and much more. That'll be your show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Want to remind everybody that you can go to myffpc.com right now to play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. There are no convoluted rules. You just pick the 10 players you want or the 12 players you want if you want to play with kickers and defenses. Get them in by 1 p.m. on Sunday. Watch them ride through the weekend's games. Remember, only one player per NFL team. You can enter for as little as $35. You can win up to $2,500. That's at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer tonight, the man behind the glass, keeping the show on the rails. It is Anthony Rivera. And because, John, I will try to remember this several times tonight. I'll probably forget. We have another 9:30 a.m. Eastern time kickoff in Frankfurt, Germany this week. Colts and Patriots. How do you normally handle that, like for your leagues that you participate in? Are you getting everything set on Saturday, or do you wake up extra early on Sunday to make sure it's all good to go?
I do a lot of DFS stuff every week as well. I jump on Underdog, or I jump on other sites too. So I do a lot of different things at different sites. So I'm usually up and preparing myself for the morning. Plus, I like to knock out a little run to go and putter out to get the sweat going, because my Sundays are just so long. 2 shows, taking notes all day, trying to turn the waiver wire column around 24 hours later to understand the league. So I'm usually up, honestly, and setting my lineup like everyone else 3 times per week. I usually do it Thursday before kickoff, and then Saturday morning before I walk out to do whatever I'm doing, because I try to make sure I escape social media and football for that day, just to give myself 24 hours of freedom. And then Sunday morning, I'll dive back in and send it.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. That's the proper way to do it for sure. Checking out 4for4.com today. Ton of news updates that we have on this website. Not only do you get the most accurate rankings at 4for4.com, the insight that I'm seeing on some of this stuff and the late breaking news that we're going to get to right away out of Cincinnati. So according to the Bengals, well, I shouldn't say according to the Bengals. So right now, today, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, both of them not on the practice field to begin practice today. Now, Higgins hurt his hamstring this week. We do know that, and it sounded like, I can't remember if there was a Zach Taylor saying this or not, John, but he's going to be evaluated on a week-to-week basis, which you'd never like to hear, obviously. Chase says he's dealing with a back injury. He says it's bruised, but he should be good to go, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be good to go at this point in time. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about this until Sunday, right? Because the Bengals don't play tonight. They don't play in Germany. We'll figure this out when we have to figure it out. But if it is indeed no Higgins and no Chase this weekend for the Bengals, is there any other fantasy players that we should be looking at starting? Think about Tyler Boyd. You think about Andre Iosivas. Hopefully I'm pronouncing the name right.
The way he told media to pronounce it, because it's the same thing that happened with Devon Achane, and is that their college media guides, for whatever reason, just never corrected the pronunciation. So it's actually Andre Yoshivas.
Would not have gotten that in 100 guesses.
Which is honestly more fun too, because anytime he scores a touchdown, just pop a little Yoshi emoji onto your social media.
Exactly. And it's more fun to say. And Trenton Irwin too is another guy that when Higgins and Chase were out, that dude had one really, really good game as well. So, and we could talk about this from like the FFPC weekly challenge aspect or from season long. What do you do if both Higgins and Chase are out this week? Any of these other guys worth playing?
I think Trenton Irwin is actually the answer, because we've already seen one game without T. Higgins this year, and Jamar Chase was on the field for that one. But it was still Chase soaking up 43% of the team's targets in week 5, and Trenton Irwin was right behind him, starting in 2 wide sets, but also soaking up 22.2% target share and 10 raw targets from Joe Burrow. So if Higgins is out and Chase plays, which is the direction I think we're leaning towards, I think Trenton Irwin is actually the player I don't mind picking up off waivers and starting in any 12-team format.
We have a situation this week where we have the Eagles on bye, the Rams on bye, the Chiefs on bye. And who's the other team on bye that I'm forgetting this week? It's another big Dolphins. Thank you. I knew it was the big fantasy team. When you have all those teams on bye and you're counting on Jamar Chase to fill in the cracks for your Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Puka Nacua, whatever teams, like, is Chase a guy that we can count on for Sunday? Or do we have to make, additions to our rosters prior to Sunday, because there is a non-zero chance that Chase misses?
Given that he was limited on Thursday and then came out and said he's still just a little sore, I think we're going to get him. I think we can depend on him playing. Of course, if you're in a situation tonight where like you only have 4 wide receivers and DJ Moore or Adam Thielen's one of them, and you just need to make sure, probably go ahead and start them. But if Chase, and that's the way I'm leaning right now, Chase is going to be active, and if he plays, I don't even worry about the injury. Again, 43% of the team's targets. Like, I'll just lean on that every single time.
That's the thing. It's like, I don't wait till 1. I wait till 11:30. And if I find out Chase is active, I start it and I don't think about, I start him and I don't think about him. To muddle, like, this is the Detroit Lions this year, John. Like, every time we think we have them figured out, something happens. We thought that, once Montgomery was out, Gibbs was going to blow up. That didn't happen. And then Montgomery misses again. And then this past week, without Montgomery, Gibbs has his biggest game of the season so far. Now we find out that Montgomery was a full participant. Haven't seen the practice reports from Detroit yet today, but he was full participant in yesterday's practice. Now we throw another monkey wrench into the situation. I think, and you tell me what you think, but I have some teams with Montgomery, some teams with Gibbs, and one team with both of them. I think you can start both these guys, but you sort of have to temper expectations, right? Tough to bench either one of these players, but I think at the same time, they're both too good, and that Lions offense is too good to have them sitting on your bench.
You can definitely start both, because when Montgomery was healthy, he was averaging 23 carries per game. The only thing is, I think Jahmyr Gibbs was so good these past 2 performances that they can't put that genie back in the bottle. You have to let him run as well. So I bet we do see a lot more of a timeshare. It's also a really interesting spot because I think the Lions have no issues regardless, because this Chargers offense lacks so much ceiling without Mike Williams. The discussion the entire offseason, which I always fought against, was, oh, no Joe Lombardi, now Kellen Moore, so Justin Herbert throws deep shots. But that's not how professional football works. Like, the reason Justin Herbert had a low ADOT last year was because he looked upfield and he saw Jalen Guyton. So, of course, he checked the ball down. Why would you throw it downfield if you only saw Jalen Guyton? And they did nothing to improve their players around him to go deep yet again. And that's why, since these past 2 weeks, especially without Mike Williams, since the Chargers have returned from the bye, they are averaging one of the lowest ADOTs in the entire league. Tommy DeVito, for reference, has a higher depth of target than Justin Herbert does. So he's still just throwing everything underneath because Austin Eckler is not his best receiver, but he's his most reliable receiver. Keenan Allen, obviously, is the best receiver. So I don't expect that to change. But the real point is that Justin Herbert is still 20th in yards per attempt without Mike Williams since week 4. He's completed less than 60% of his passes in 4 of his last 5 games without Williams. So I just don't think there's a ceiling here. Thus, I think the Lions can kind of have their way in this spot. Having said that, with David Montgomery this year, the Lions were 5th in run play rate from a neutral game script. They wanted to be a running team, and that makes sense given Dan Campbell's personality. So I think they can do that. Having said that, Goff has been awesome against zone coverage this year, and that's what the Chargers do. They run zone at the 10th highest rate in the league, and Goff has not only completed 70% of his passes against zone coverage, he's tied with Kirk Cousins for the league lead with 8 touchdowns against zone as well. So I honestly just think they're going to have their way, and that the laying to 3 points with them is too shallow because they're the much better team than the Chargers.
Yeah, I know they hit the road and they're going out west, but at the same time, total of 48.5. That there's a lot of fantasy goodness in this game from both teams, and we'll touch more on Quentin Johnston later on. I want to get your opinion on him for sure. But Gibbs and Montgomery, I'm not setting either one of those guys in any of my leagues. They are in my lineups for sure.
I agree.
Let's go to the YouTube chat right now. Bryce Ridley is hanging out in there. He has one of the toughest yet best receiver decisions he has to make this week. I can't even believe how rich he is at the wideout position. He has to pick. He's got 7 guys here. He's got to pick 3 of these guys to play. So he's got Devontae Adams, Brandon Ayuk, Adam Thielen, Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk, and Deontay Johnson. John, this is insane. Okay, so I look at this. Ayuk, I really want to play. The Niners coming off the bye. I want to get him in my lineup.
Oh, yeah.
Thielen, I mean, what's his floor right now? 5 for 60, something like that. Like every single week he's putting up massive numbers. I can't sit him. So it comes down to the other ones. I think it comes down to kind of Devontae Adams or Deontay Johnson for me. I am a sucker for the talent. I usually play the talent. Devontae Adams is more talented than Deontay Johnson. I know that Deontay Johnson is going to be facing a Green Bay Packers secondary for the second straight week, starting probably a 7th-round rookie at safety and another 7th-round rookie at corner in Carrington Valentine and Anthony Johnson. So there could be a potential for Deontay Johnson to make some plays there, but I'm a sucker for Adams. So I'm going to lean towards Adams, my third guy. I'm playing Ayuk and Thielen for sure. Your thoughts on these guys?
I think we're far enough to remove to where I don't even worry about where you drafted guys anymore. Like, we've adjusted so much data by now. So I don't blame you. It's really hard to say, for me to say sit Adams and then to actually do that action. I totally get it. But I do think Deontay Johnson's the significantly better play just because the target share and the opportunity are so much more enticing than what Adams showing right now. It's such a miserable spot, too, against the Jets secondary, who is carrying their weight. Everyone they've faced, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, they just drowned them all and did their part. The issue is, of course, is that the Jets offense is what's not doing anything whatsoever because it's their fault. They saw Zach Wilson play for 2 years and they didn't do anything behind Aaron Rodgers. So they kind of deserve what's coming to them. But Deontay Johnson out of the bye since returning, 26%, 35%, and 31% of the team's targets. These past 2 games in particular, George Pickens has gone back to the same crap he's always done under Matt Canada, which is not his fault, but they only send him on go routes. Over half of his routes are go routes. And as we know, those are the hardest and least efficient routes in fantasy football because you're basically being asked to battle for all your points. That's the same thing that's happening with Christian Watson, Chris Olave, Marquise Brown to this point. They're all just Garrett Wilson. They're all just, you better catch a touchdown. Otherwise, you do nothing because of how your dumb play callers are using you. And that's what's happening. So I'm out on Devontae Adams compared to these options. I just think Deontay Johnson is the much better player.
Okay. So it's very close between Adams and Johnson. I think this is why you're so good, is because I think you've convinced me to say Johnson over Adams. What about Ayuk and Thielen? If he's got to pick 3, are those the top 2?
They are. Again, since this is the kind of lineup I like to put myself in, because you want to stack your roster with the best players possible, and these are good problems to have, right? To say, I'm going to play the matchup every week. And in this case, there is no way in hell I'm benching Brandon Ayuk. So you mentioned it coming out of the bye, but also, I love the 49ers in this spot because Brock Purdy's issues these last 3 games still haven't come from a clean pocket. It's only been when he's under pressure. And we know the Jaguars can't get pressure. They're 25th in pressure rate. They're 26th in sacks. And Purdy leads the league in yards per attempt and completion rate from a clean pocket. Not only that, but the Jaguars are one of 4 defenses playing zone coverage on over 80% of their snaps. And against zone coverage this year, Brandon Ayuk has seen 61% of his targets for the second most yards per catch and a league high in yards per route run. This is a game where Ayuk douses them in flames. I'm so excited about Ayuk in every format this week. And then Adam Thielen, I would argue that I knew he was closer to a wide receiver 2 or 3 last week. A lot of people were citing his raw stats, but we know Gus Bradley has never seen a defensive snap that he doesn't want to play zone coverage on. That's what the Colts do week in and week out. And Adam Thielen against zone coverage this year is literally 50th among all wide receivers in targets per route run. It was a bad matchup last week. Whereas the Bears with Jalen Johnson, because he's a cornerback you can comfortably leave on an island outside, they are playing a top 10 rate of man coverage. They'll have Jalen Johnson tonight. So I love the spot for Adam Thielen.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that's great points that you make too about, like, so oftentimes we don't think necessarily about zone versus man coverage, but when the stats are there and we can find out exactly how these guys are doing against that, I think that's something that we need to take into account. And I know you take into account when you're crunching everything over at 4 for 4. Another question from the YouTube chat. Our buddy Dom Gazzetti is in a 20-team league. Congratulations to you, Dom. I could never pull something like that off. It's too maddening for me. He's got a flex question. One of these 3 guys. He's got Gerald Everett, who's going against the Lions, obviously. Michael Wilson, who is against the Falcons, and then Kyle Phillips. Like, this sets a record. First Kyle Phillips question we've ever had on this show ever. He's at Tampa this week. You can only pick one of these guys in half PPR. I lean towards Everett. John, what do you say?
It's just so hard for me because, like Seattle's tight ends, the Chargers tight ends, if you could combine them into one, if we could make them a transformer, they'd be the best tight end of the league. But instead, it's 3 guys out there constantly. I think I actually say Kyle Phillips in this spot. So on one hand, Kyle Phillips had a 14% target share last week without Treylon Burks, or with Burks getting injured. And now Burks is going to be out this game. So I think it's a good spot. But also, the Steelers have been leaky to opposing slot receivers, so it makes sense that he's the one to pop. Having said that, the Bucs now, this is why we were on CJ Stroud last week. Stroud is a god. Don't get me wrong. He's amazing, and I'm so happy he's a face of a franchise. Already looks like a veteran as a rookie. But the point is, the Bucs defense over the last month since they returned from their bye have allowed a 73% completion rate, 9.2 yards per attempt, and 26.7 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. It has become the best spot possible for passing offenses. And that includes Will Levis, DeAndre Hopkins, and since Burks is out, Kyle Phillips this week. So I think I actually take the points with Kyle Phillips.
Yeah, and you're making a compelling argument too. And we're going to get into the Will Levis discussion later on, but I actually have a local fantasy football show here in Northeast Wisconsin, John, and I had one of my co-hosts had a question about Levis versus Heineke this week, and I sent him your X, the tweet that you put out about Will Levis,
which I put up just because I want to play Will Levis. Right,
exactly.
By the way.
Yeah.
My tweets are literally just my journal. It's like my notebook. It's like I'm just gonna I'm gonna like diary of my notes out here for everybody to see, and then what you do with them is like what I don't care how you treat them, but those are my notes for the week. So I want to play Will Levis.
We'll talk about Will Levis coming up later on in the show too, but I think you're right. I think he's in for a Buffalo week. Another guy that a lot of people are counting on, and there's a non-zero chance Justin Jefferson comes back this week. I don't think it's going to happen. The practice window has opened up for Jefferson. He has 21 days now to be activated by the Vikings. So certainly this is good that he's coming back from this hamstring injury. He's missed the last 4 games. He himself said he couldn't put a date on when he might return. And I always think that's kind of concerning because I think players kind of overrate how close they are to action and how good their injury is and how close they are. So the fact that he's not even putting a timetable on it, the fact that he wants to be 100% before he comes back, he says he's day to day, but when that day comes where he's back in the lineup, it's not going to be Kirk Cousins throwing to him. It's going to be Joshua Dobbs. How much of a downgrade is it when Jefferson gets back out there? How much are you lowering your expectations for Justin Jefferson's output, catching balls from Joshua Dobbs? And not only that, John, but when Jefferson gets back out there, how does he affect guys like Hawkinson? How does he affect guys like Jordan Addison?
Definitely still worried about Justin Jefferson coming back because you could argue Kirk Cousins was having the best season of his entire
Mm-hmm.
career, or at least the best season in Minnesota. He was amazing. I believe he was second in completion rate under pressure too before he got injured. Just, man, he was having such a hell of a year. But Josh Dobbs, it's kind of the same thing we saw in Arizona over the last month, where he just lost some of the magic. Now, I want him to succeed, but the issue was he was bottom 5 in completion rate on throws 10 yards deep, which is what Jefferson has practically run this year, with TJ Hawkinson being that underneath guy. Hawkinson only getting pelted with volume, running like 2-yard routes, and that's about it. And so I do worry about the ceiling for Jefferson. If you're still in a league where the trade deadlines close next week, because that's what happens in a lot of redraft leagues, I'm definitely looking at trying to sell Jefferson high more than anything. I don't think he comes back this week. I also think it's a tough matchup for the Vikings, so I worry about them going 1-1 with Dobbs anyhow. But yeah, I actually think I lean towards selling Jefferson high based on name value, thinking that Dobbs, as good of a story as he is, as much as I want him to work out, he still limits what this offense can do. Also, last week when he came in, it's kind of the same thing. He targeted Arizona's tight ends at the second highest rate in the league. He came off the bench. He targeted TJ Hawkinson with 41% of his targets. So it's kind of the same way the Cardinals offense runs too.
What about, as long as, and this, I don't have this on the show sheet the rest of the way, so and as long as we're talking Vikings here, Hawkinson is dealing with a rib oblique injury right now. He gets the Saints at home this week. Any concerns about him? Because there's a lot of people that have Hawkinson as their only tight end on their roster, and obviously, if he can't go, you got to make other moves to make sure you have a backup.
And they did give Josh Oliver $21 million, so you would think that's the player that steps up. Although, it's like, do we have a lot of confidence outside of tight end premium leagues to plug him in? I don't think so. So if Hawkinson's out there, I'm still just throwing him out there. Again, especially given what they're asking him to do all year long. He's not running any deep routes, anything complicated. He literally just drags near the line of scrimmage and catches underneath balls for volume. So I don't think this injury would complicate that. I think he plays, but it is a little more worrisome, his status anyways, his availability, than I would like it to be.
Kyler Murray, let's talk about him, because we sort of buried the lead. He's been officially activated from the PUP list to the Cardinals active roster. Jonathan Gannon is hasn't really tried to hide it. Murray is going to be starting this week when the Cardinals take on the Atlanta Falcons. I only personally have Murray on one team. I think it's my Scott Fishbowl team that I have him on, and I'm going to be deploying him here in that league. Well, what about single quarterback leagues like the FFPC, like the Fantasy Pros Championship, the main event, the FFPC, what have you, where you only have to play one? Kyler Murray, how high does he rank for you this week? And is he a guy that, despite him missing training camp, preseason, and the entire regular season so far, can you actually make a case for starting him for the first time in Week 10?
I'm worried about this spot for Kyler. And from a top-down perspective, I just think there are so many quarterbacks in that same tier with Kyler in significantly better matchups, if not equal, that I don't even want to take on the risk. I don't think the reward is worth taking on the risk. We've talked about Will Levis's spot. Someone like Geno Smith now going against this Commanders defense that pressured Mac Jones on only 23% of dropbacks. They only sacked him one time without Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Geno Smith is in the best possible spot all year long. And again, he's in that same tier of these questions people are asking. I think Josh Dobbs' rushing floor, he's tacked on at least 4.8 rushing points in 7 of his last 8 games. And now he's getting the Saints, who play a lot of man coverage. And logically, that's why they're second in the league in rushing yards per game allowed to quarterbacks. Because whenever everyone has their backs turned because you're playing man coverage, the quarterbacks usually can scramble easier because they don't have someone spying them. So I like Josh Dobbs' floor better than playing Kyler Murray too. I don't think it's worth it. And then I guess if you're looking around for someone else like Sam Howell too, kind of in that same range, averaging a league high in dropbacks per game, I'm just going to take that volume instead. So to me, I think I'm a little more down on Kyler the consensus, given that it's his first game back. I don't think he'll have the rushing floor. He just tore his ACL in December. So I'm a little more worried than a lot of people personally.
And I think you make a strong case for that too. Like in single quarterback leagues, unless you have Hurts or Tagovailoa or Mahomes or Stafford, any of those guys on bye, hopefully you can do better than Kyler Murray, at least for Week 10. Let's go back to the YouTube chat. Dom Gazzetti. Anthony, you could throw that up on the screen. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it boils down to this. Gus Edwards for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Which end of that trade would you rather have? Is it better to get rid of Edwards right now and then get JSN for the stretch run, John? And
I am looking at
and we'll get into the Keaton Mitchell aspect of this too, but I think that's something we need to consider as well.
I'm looking at the running backs and wide receivers, and I think given your running backs and your roster, because I'm glad you actually included it. And usually when you're doing a live show, it's complicated to read it all off. Like we've all been in this situation because you need to understand the context of everyone's team to actually understand which position they would pick. Same with trade questions. It's like, I need to see both rosters to understand like why people are doing what they're doing. Having said that, I think JSN helps this roster out more because Christian Watson, unfortunately, is just unusable. And I have him on so many teams. I don't have the courage to drop him. I'm just going to hold him and hope he cheers on my team for the rest of the year. But Jordan Love is second to last in completion rate on throws 10 yards downfield. This is not a Watson problem. This is a Jordan Love problem, who's also only PJ Walker has completed less of his passes from a clean pocket this year than Jordan Love. He is miserable and not the answer. From watching every game in Wisconsin.
Now here's the thing, John. Here's what I'll say. And I hear this from a lot of people. I will tell you that Jordan Love, at this point of his career, one of the worst deep ball passers in the NFL. I think that's inarguable at this point. There is a lot of bashing of Love, and I think some of it's unfair because, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I watch these games, and my God, the amount of passes that Luke Musgrave drops, Romeo Doubs drops, and I'm not saying they're like dead on, like they should make these catches, but they're catchable balls. And you're talking about players that Jaden Reed is another one. Players that were drafted in the second round of the NFL draft, they got to make these plays. Love needs to become he needs to be a better downfield passer. I am still, to me, the jury's still out because they have had horrific offensive line play this year. And I know you just said the clean pocket stat, which is,
and Bakhtiari's been out since week 2.
And like he's done. Like he is not part of the future of the Packers. But the offensive line play, from the standpoint of, and this gets back to the Watson thing, and we're going to get into Christian Watson. What's frustrating to me watching these games, we've seen these guys do this before. Watson was unbelievable the second half of the 2022 season. John Runyon Jr., the right guard, and Elton Jenkins, who's been an all-pro. These guys should not be stinking it up as much as they have. And Jenkins has come on a little bit more. But yes, Jordan Love is part of the problem, but he is far from the only problem on this roster. I feel like he was put in a situation and maybe this is unfair, but he is growing up with these receivers and tight ends. I still feel like I need to see more. I need to see better play from Musgrave and Reed, and especially Watson and Doubs too are dominating the offensive snaps. You can make a case that Dontavian Wicks, the rookie, is actually the best receiver on this team so far based on what he's been able to do in his limited snaps. Love has a lot to work on. I don't think it's all his fault.
And being in Chicago, having lots of Midwest friends, I know that a lot of people in Wisconsin also complain about Matt LaFleur's play calling because he should, if the problem is Jordan Love throwing deep, which that's a big problem, how about you eliminate that? Like the Saints, right? Derek Carr for his career has been a miserable red zone quarterback. He's brought his teams down, honestly. And it just took the Saints the last 2 weeks to finally say, you know what? Screw this. Like, we don't care how much we paid you. You're coming off the field inside the 20, and Taysom Hill's going to take us home. And they've become a much better scoring offense for that reason. I think Matt LaFleur needs to involve Aaron Jones more, get Jaden Reed involved more on slants, get Christian Watson involved on slants, and actually take the game plan closer to the line of scrimmage to help his quarterback out.
I remember last year, if you remember, there was a Sunday night game between Buffalo and Green Bay, and Buffalo was heavy favorites in this game. Part of the reason that the Bills ended up winning that game, I think by double digits, was because Matt LaFleur actually installed a game plan that was very focused on Christian Watson, right? And this is when Watson was doing his Hercules tour, where he was crushing everybody every single week. What happened to Watson? First drive, concussion, boom, he's out. And then that kind of threw everything off. These guys have done it before. Matt LaFleur, one of the big critiques on him is he doesn't always craft the game plan to the talent he has available. I think last week we saw a glimmer of hope because over the course of LaFleur coaching the Packers, he has gone away from Aaron Jones way too much. What happened last week? He pounded Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones had his best game since week 1 against the Bears. This Packers thing, It's still a work in progress. We knew it was going to be frustrating this year. I didn't think it was going to be this bad, like especially with Watson. Like, to me, he's such a talent that you should be able to game plan him in and scheme him into fantasy production. And it hasn't happened. And that's what's been frustrating for me.
And he does have a history of injuries.
Yes.
Like the greatest predictor of future injuries is past injuries. And like, that's something he struggled with going all the way back to North Dakota State. Even on Sunday, I don't think people realize he suffered 3 injuries on Sunday. He had a concussion, he got cleared from, then had the chest and back injuries. Like, dude, calm down. Like, just take a few days off.
And the other thing too, John, it was basically from one play. He had 3 injuries from one play when he went up and made that his only catch of the game, by the way, that 37-yard catch downfield. Let me, and I know we're up against the break. I'll get to the break in a second, but the last thing I want to say about Watson, this is something, and I don't have any statistics or facts behind this, but I often wondered, the Packers in their drafts under Brian Gutekunst have focused so much on athleticism, relative athletic score, everything like that. Watson was unbelievably high on that. Can you be too athletic to play football? Because sometimes I wonder if Watson is just wound so tight. Sometimes I think that contributes to why he has these soft tissue injuries. Matt LaFleur said, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that the Packers are doing a deep dive to find out why they have so many soft tissue injuries on the team. But is it a case of like they're drafting? Can you be too athletic to play in the NFL?
Maybe it's soft tissue injuries in the weather they have there. I'm not sure, because the Colts and Chris Ballard also do that, where they prioritize RAS scores. So I don't know, actually. It's a good question.
It's something I haven't found the answer to. We're going to try to answer that question and much more. Homer Simpson, Ryan J., we have your questions answered when we come back from break. We're going to find out what we're doing on the BettorCast tonight with the Panthers and Bears. Still about 45 minutes away from kickoff. John Daigle is going to help me set and answer these questions on the BettorCast coming up. Download it right now in the App Store or Google Play for free. Play along with us. He's John Daigle from 4 for 4 Fantasy Football. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on right after this on the Better Sports Network.
I like to eat my feelings. So when I'm like super sad, single serving pint sizes of Ben and Jerry's, I just start shoveling that in, and it makes me feel bigger and better. But so let's eat our feelings here. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk football players, food. We're gonna pair them up. Who is represented by what food? All right. I want to just shout out Hal Alexander in there for CMC. Christian McCaffrey is Rocky Road ice cream. A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
does it?
Good Hal.
I like it, man. You know it. I love me some Rocky Road ice cream. Bijan Robinson prime rib. You know what? Bijan Robinson prime rib with a baked potato and some cream spinach on the side. That's what I'm talking about. That is the King's dinner. And Bijan Robinson, I don't care if the dude from The Athletic says only 301, touches. You know what? In honor of Card Sharks, I'm going to say, guys, that I think that number is going to be a little bit higher there for Bijan Robinson. So get your knife, get your fork, you got your steak, you got your Bijan.
Yeah, that's what's up. You're on death row, and they say you get one last meal, and you just say Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. Love it.
I got to jump in on one real quick because Mr. Scamper said Kareem Hunt is candy corn, and I actually had a player, Tyler Boyd, was going to be candy corn for me, and basically it's that nobody likes it, but it's always there. It's always there, and somebody always puts their hand in and grabs some and has some, and they're like, well, and afterwards they're like, why did I eat that? That's Tyler Boyd. He always gets drafted, and he's just kind of there, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows why they take him. Nobody knows where it comes from. Where does the candy corn even come from? Like, it's just there. It's just there.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on here on the Better Sports Network. 25 minutes until the top of the hour. We have about 40 minutes until kickoff of the Thursday night game between the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears tonight, live from Soldier Field. How far are you away from Soldier Field, John Daigle, from 4for4.com?
I live in a neighborhood called Logan Square, and so it's roughly 3.5, 4 miles.
Okay.
Not far
So
at
you're
all.
very close.
But, Soldier Field, the disaster of it is that maybe tonight, like, I would have a little bit of time to pop out. I can make Thursday games or week 18 games. That's the only time during the season I can make a football game. But Soldier Field is, the way they built it is a tragedy. It's one way in, one way out. Or pedestrians. Like, you can't even really get a car up to the stadium. So it just takes literally an errand to get there. And thus it ruins the night if I try to go.
I get it. I totally get it. So for those of you like John, like myself, who will not be in attendance at the game tonight, download the BettorCast app right now, because the BSN is gamifying Thursday Night Football on the BettorCast app. You can check out Moose and Keith's game preview of the Panthers and Bears, including some of their top picks and plays. Compete in our free contest after that. Answer your pregame questions, which John and I are about to do right now. They're live in the BettorCast app. Tonight during the game, you can predict what's going to happen, test your NFL knowledge with all the live questions throughout the game. You can chat with all the fans we're going to have in there, all the big plays, the top performers, and, of course, the weekly boss in real time. There's no purchase necessary. There's no subscription necessary. It's always free to play. You can watch Thursday Night Football with us this evening. Play our free contest and win tickets. The more questions you answer, the more tickets you win, and then redeem those tickets for authentic NFL signed gear and NFL collectibles. Just download the free BettorCast app in the App Store and the Google Play Store right now. You just have to be 18 years or older. Now, while you download that, John and I are going to answer 2 questions for some people that have been very patient. Homer Simpson watching us on YouTube right now. Cole Kmet or Chris Godwin this week? We're talking half PPR. Obviously, Kmet in action against the Carolina Panthers tonight. Godwin is going to be taking on the Tennessee Titans. I'm assuming non-tight end premium in this case, and that's why I'm going to lean towards Godwin here over Cole Kmet. John, what do you think?
I agree. He had been coming on strong, actually, the past month, and maybe it's because Mike Evans has been a little bit more banged up, but even then, Godwin has quietly seen at least 7 targets in 4 consecutive games now. So, before this past week. So yeah, I agree. I think Godwin is the play here in a bounce back spot.
The other one that we have on tonight's game, it's the 2 running backs, right? That's the starting 2 running backs. Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, the Ryan J, who's hanging out on YouTube watching us tonight. He can only play one of them. I still think I know Miles Sanders is not the starter, but I still think he factors into the backfield. And I know Evans and Roschon Johnson are gonna work themselves in, but Foreman's done it, man. Like, he's shown us what he's able to do. I'm going to play Foreman against the Panthers defense before I'm going to play Hubbard tonight. What say you?
I'm playing Foreman. I'm a little more worried than a lot of people because the last 2 games, the Panthers have gotten more defenders healthy from their bye, and they've actually been good against the run. Even Zach Moss last week, 3.7 yards per carry. Jonathan Taylor got there with the receiving score. He only averaged 2.6 yards per carry. And so I'm a little bit concerned here. Having said that, I don't think people realize, like, a lot of times organizations go into the offseason, make some big splashes in free agency, it doesn't pan out. Dude, the linebackers the Bears got are so good. And that's why they're literally leading the league with the fewest yards per carry allowed to opposing running backs. They just shut them down when you try to run against them. The issue is that they can't cover running backs out of the backfield to save their life. But I don't know if that's Chuba's role, honestly, because last week that was Miles Sanders' role. So Chuba also, like, we held him onto our bench thinking, okay, when you get the touches, you had been so good, it'll be fine. But now these past 2 games, the entire reason Sanders was benched is how Chuba is performing these last 2 games. 3.6 yards per carry this past week. He had 1.8, just 28 rushing yards and 15 carries 2 weeks ago. So I worry about Hubbard's role, honestly. I think we see more of a shift back to Sanders tonight, honestly.
If that's the case, and this leads into our first question for the BettorCast tonight, we have the total on that app set at 41.5 rushing yards. Sounds to me like you like the under for tonight, less than 41.
Oh, I've been playing it under, and like I told everyone, I'll play it all the way down to 40. Yeah, it opened at like 45.5. I said, I'll just keep playing that. That's fine. So yeah, anything under 40, I'm good with, or anything up to 40, I'm good with under Chuba rushing yards. Yeah.
All right, so we're taking under there. Now the other one, let's go to the other side of the coin here. Deontay Foreman, more or less than 28.5 rushing yards. Now at this point, I don't know if the total was set when we didn't know if Khalil Herbert was going to be activated off IR We now know he is not going to be activated off IR, but we do know the presence of Roschon Johnson. We do know the presence of Darrington Evans and the fact that Tyson Bagent is going to be the quarterback tonight. 28.5 rushing yards for Foreman. It seems like it's a slam dunk over, but how do you feel about it?
Probably an over. We have seen, this goes back to last year. Foreman is one of the biggest front-running running backs, like Derrick Henry in the entire NFL. If you can project the game script, you can project what Foreman will do. And that's if the Bears are losing or trailing, he's coming off the field. That's all Roschon Johnson and previously Darrington Evans, although I think they only used Evans last week more because Roschon had the flu. I hear behind the scenes Roschon is fully healthy tonight. I wonder if we see a little more of a bump in his favor. But if you think the Bears contend or lead as they quietly last week against New Orleans, that was a one-score game until the middle of the fourth quarter. Like, they didn't get blown out until the Saints finally put 14 points on the board with less than 7 minutes to go. And so that's why, because they hung around, they could allow Foreman to have 20 carries. So if you think the Bears hang around tonight or just win the game outright, it's going to be a Foreman game. That's just the way you look at it.
Yeah, and that's when you go more than for sure on this as well. I can't remember what week it was, John. It was probably like 4 weeks ago, roughly. The Bears are playing the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. I had Mike Shope on from the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast, WGR 550 in Buffalo, and we were talking about the DJ Moore more or less than, I think it was like 42.5 at the time. And we debated it. We're like, God, going back and forth. All right, well, let's say over. So we went over on it. And during, because we basically do this show through the first quarter of the game, DJ Moore had the over on the second play of the game on a big bomb. That was the night that he went absolute ham, 3 touchdowns, whatever it was.
That was when Emmanuel Forbes got benched because they realized we can't draft a 160-pound cornerback in the first round. Yeah.
And I remember why, after the show, I was hanging out in the BettorCast watching. I'm like, I can't believe what I'm seeing here with DJ Moore. This is unbelievable. And now tonight we look at his receiving yards. It's set at 52.5. Now won't have Justin Fields throwing to him. It's going to be Tyson Bagent. It's against the Carolina Panthers. 52.5 for DJ Moore. Does that seem attainable to you?
It does. The market's honestly probably about right on it, but I view this as more of a game the Bears just can't run away with, because I do think the Panthers passing attack will have success given the splits we mentioned earlier about the Bears playing more man coverage, and Bryce Young and Adam Thielen have been really good against man coverage. And so I think they have to use DJ Moore tonight. Plus, he's been over that number in 2 of his last 3 games from Bagent. So I'm comfortable with the over here.
We're going to go with the over on DJ Moore for sure. The next one is the guy we talked about earlier in the show, and I think I already may have your answer on this. Adam Thielen has his total of receiving yards set right now, John, at 67.5 against the Bears. I lean towards it. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I have Thielen on not enough teams this year. It just seems like every time we have expectations for this guy, he ends up going over the top. I think he goes over the top tonight, right?
I completely agree. It's just as I mentioned earlier. It's strictly against zone coverage where he struggled all year long, 50 in targets per route run, whereas against man, he's top 10. He's doing what you've seen him do every single week. So I think it's going to be a big night for Adam Thielen. Yes.
And that's not even going out on a limb at this point too. He's had so many big games so far this season, and it probably continues tonight. Okay, now this is a little bit of a different one here. We're going to go for receiving yards, but we're going to go not for a receiver. We're going to go for a tight end in Cole Kmet, 35.5. Now, John, as we look at, and I know these are all different teams and it's the course of the season, and the Bears aren't the same team they were at the start of September that they are now, but Cole Kmet has had more than 35.5 receiving yards on the season. It looks like 6 times. He has only gone under twice. So to me, you look at this and you say, okay, he's going to hit 35.5, and he's been targeted a lot. I mean, what has he been, 18 targets the last 2 weeks? This looks really, really promising for Kmet. And oh, by the way, that was with Bagent already throwing to him. That wasn't Justin Fields. It's hard for me to make an argument that he's going to go under this tonight.
I agree. And the Panthers are a below average team in terms of what they've allowed to tight ends. They've literally allowed a bottom 3 rate of catches per game to opposing tight ends. But given the amount of volume and no competition for Cole Kmet, I do think the over, that's a pretty low number. Yes.
I don't know how you feel about props like this, but when you have somebody like Hayden Hurst, who is not going to have a high number, and sometimes it just takes like one play for these guys to hit that number. I don't know how you like to play this, but Hayden Hurst has his number for receiving yards tonight set at 16.5. He has hit that number 4 times so far this season, but he is coming off, bear in mind, a 2-catch for 54 outing against the Indianapolis Colts. He saw 4 targets. It's the second most targets he's seen all season long. I don't know where to go with this one. I just have no feeling.
And the problem is that they're still using 3 tight ends. Like ever since out of their bye, they've used Tommy Trimble and Steven Sullivan for double-digit routes in every game. So I honestly consider it more of a blip on the radar last week's performance than something consistent. 16.5 is really low, so it's one I usually just shy away from. But if you force me to choose one, I actually probably lean under.
We're going to go under on this one because the thing is, against Houston the week before, he had 2 targets, no catches. So who the heck knows with Hayden Hurst for sure. Let's get into the quarterbacks. We've been avoiding the quarterbacks. Bryce Young, he has his passing yards set at 215.5 right now. 215.5 against the Chicago Bears defense tonight. John, where do you see because I think Bryce, and we could talk about Bryce Young a little bit here, but to me, when you compare the number 1 and the number 2 picks in the draft this year, my God, CJ Stroud is just leaps and bounds better than the number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young. And maybe we unfairly compare the two. Maybe it's fair that we compare the two. But Young, I don't really know where to go with this one tonight. Outside of Thielen, there's nobody I can trust on Carolina's pass catching core.
I mean, that kind of explains everything, is that Bryce Young has no one to work with. And it could be he has size issues. Like, there's still a lot of questions about Bryce Young for sure. Whereas like CJ Stroud was amazing in college and has talent around him. Even someone like Nico Collins, remember, he was recruited to Alabama and Georgia, like the top teams in the nation. He just chose Michigan because Jim Harbaugh was the hottest name in coaching at the time. And so like, that's why he chose Michigan over everyone else. So yeah, Nico Collins has pedigree too. Having said that, I do think it's an over game for Bryce Young, perhaps barely, but the interesting wrinkle the Panthers threw under Thomas Brown out of their bye the past 2 weeks is that they're no longer a team that runs the ball in early downs. They've passed in over 60% of their first and second downs, which tells you a team's intent. It's intelligent to do so. That way you're not setting yourself up for longer second and third downs. That's how you get in trouble. That's actually what the Bengals quietly did last week against the Bucs. The first quarter, they did run the ball on their first 4 first downs. And it took 9 weeks, but it finally hit Bobby Slowick, and he said, dude, like, we can't do this. Like, we cannot run the ball. And they just started launching it. And of course, CJ Stroud averaged over 10 yards per attempt on early downs. Just crushed them. So I think the Panthers have a little bit of faith here. Their offense is a little more interesting than a lot of people think.
So are you saying, I mean, like, is it an overplay then for Bryce Young tonight?
It is an overplay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I should have said that. Overplay.
Yeah. No, I kind of got that from what you were saying too. Bryce Young has only hit that number 215.5 3 times so far this season, but all 3 times were within the last 4 weeks. I don't know if we can say he's getting it, but certainly things are trending upward for the young quarterbacks out of Alabama. All right, that was Bryce Young. Let's get into his counterpart, Tyson Bagent, who's going to be throwing to Kmet. He's going to be throwing to DJ Moore. We talked about those guys as well as Deontay Foreman already. His total is set at 188.5. Is Tyson Bagent tonight, going up against a Carolina defense that does have some playmakers on it. And this sort of comes down to game flow, right? If you think the Bears are in this game all the way to the end, or maybe coming up with a victory, it may not be on the arm of Tyson Bagent. It might be on the legs of Deontay Foreman and the defense, and maybe the shortcomings of the Carolina Panthers offense. But Bagent at 188.5, if we have to go one way on this, John, which way are we going?
I will lean the under because the Bears still want to be a running team. I just don't know if they can do it in this spot despite contrary belief. So I'll go the under on Bagent.
Speaking of under, what about the total tonight? 38.5 is what it's set at. Neither one of these teams is, reinventing offense the way that maybe Andy Reid's Chiefs or Mike McDaniel's Dolphins are. I think that's being kind. 38.5. I lean towards the under on this. John, what are your feelings on it?
I lean towards the under. It's very hard to bet an over in 2023 professional football.
Yes, it is. That's a great point. Why is that, by the way?
It's for a variety of reasons. I think we've seen, although we're top heavy in the league, we're seeing some of the worst quarterback play we've ever seen. I think it's because how much kids bounce around now in college. I also think because college schemes don't although they're fun, college football is a lot of fun, they don't translate to professional football anymore. Not to mention, like, I'm still on board, like baseball banning the shift. I really think NFL should ban 3 high safeties looks because it's just ruining football. That's why everyone's having to throw underneath. That's why we're seeing less points, like literally ever. We're averaging the fewest points per game ever in NFL history. It's bad news right now, the product. And I think that's it's just a lot of combined reasons.
The last thing I want to get to, and then we're going to answer some of these YouTube questions here. Which team will win the game? Now, in the BettorCast, you'll get points for correct answers. If we pick the Bears here, John, we will get 10 points if we're right. But if we pick the Panthers, we're going to get 15 points here tonight. I almost think in a close game like this, we go with Carolina, right? Even though they're on the road.
Yeah, it's a money line, or do we get? Is this like betting? Do I get the 3.5?
No. This is just straight up. This is money line.
I'll still go the Panthers.
Okay,
that's fine. Yeah, I did, for transparency, I did bet the Panthers plus the 3.5. It was on 3. It got moved to 3.5. I like the hook. I mean, honestly, should the Bears be favored by 3 points against anyone? Literally anyone? That doesn't make any sense at all. So that's the number I took, but I'll take the money line with you. Right. Sure.
Yeah, I think that's a smart play here, given what we can get. And by the way, if you want to play with us tonight, make sure you're downloading the BettorCast app free in the Google Play Store as well as the App Store. For those of you using the iOS products, that is going to be a lot of fun tonight. That's just the pregame questions we covered. We'll get into the actual in-game questions coming up a little bit before the game kicks off tonight, which should be in about 23 minutes or so. Before we get into the second half of the show here tonight, John, let's get into some of the questions that we have in the YouTube chat. Look, we'll go to T. Zinch right now. Javonte Williams or Ramondre Stevenson? This is a full PPR question that they have right now. Only can play one of these guys. Now, Javonte Williams is obviously at Buffalo this week in Orchard Park, which is where he'll be playing. Ramondre Stevenson is at home, but it's in Frankfurt, Germany against the Indianapolis Colts. Which one are you leaning towards here?
Oh, it's far and away Javonte Williams. I don't think it's even close either. We saw since Javonte Williams returned from injury 3 weeks ago, then had the bye, his share of the team's backfield touches increased progressively in every game. But against the Chiefs before the bye, a season high 77% of the Broncos' backfield touches, 30 raw touches in general, looked more explosive than ever. And now you have this Bills defense that the market still isn't adjusting correctly because they're not good. Ever since they lost Matt Milano and Tre'Davious White, they just don't have the players to cover anybody. They're 20th in the league in the rate of explosive runs allowed per 10-yard gains. So I think it's a pretty great spot for Javonte Williams quietly.
You know, and what's your feeling? Because I've had a situation where I have Samaje Perine in a lot of leagues, and I hate to cut running backs because you never know when an injury could happen.
Yeah.
And
he's been
he's
unfortunately
just talk about like from the standpoint of not only Perine, but how does Jaleel McLaughlin figure into this as well? Go ahead.
Perine has, unfortunately, the last 3 weeks basically been eliminated. They have to be getting blown out. The thing is, though, is that no one's noticed the Broncos defense has turned a corner. They always had too many good players to be that historically bad unit they were in the first month of the season. And now their last 4 games, they've finally crept up to an above average team and creating pressure. But not only that, 12th in yards per attempt, limiting yards per attempt, and 10th in limiting explosive plays through the air. They're good. And so, like, now they found their identity in being able to run the ball behind all of the expensive additions they added on the offensive line in free agency, and now a healthy Javonte Williams. So they're actually a team to look out to that will probably try and slow it down over the second half of the season. Russell Wilson's leading the league in touchdown rate. I don't expect it to continue because he's been like so uber efficient. But at the same time, the offense has not been the problem. It's been the defense. And now that defense is suddenly clicking. So yes, no more P. Ryan. Jaleel McLaughlin, who is really good. I don't know, like Michael Thomas, I don't know how Sean Payton found him. This little undrafted kid who is genuinely like the poor man's Austin Eckler. He is so damn good when he gets the ball in his hands, and he earns targets. So if Javonte were to ever go down, I would imagine a lot of it would just go to McLaughlin. But at the same time, they are finally entrusting Williams, who looks amazing. Yeah. So I think the pecking order is Javonte, McLaughlin, and then P.
So, like, especially this week with so many people facing issues with the Rams, the Dolphins, the Eagles, and the Chiefs, P. Ryan's cuttable in your mind.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on from there, Lil Bro 17. God, I need glasses, John. It sucks getting old. Chuba Hubbard or Taysom Hill in the flex position. I said earlier on one of my other shows, like Taysom Hill has been heavily involved in that Saints offense the last couple of weeks, especially this past week, catching a touchdown and throwing a touchdown. And oh, by the way, leading the team in rushing as well. You mentioned it earlier in the show, how Derek Carr has not been coming through for his team in the red zone. Taysom Hill takes over here. We already talked about the potential rise of Miles Sanders or the revenge of Miles Sanders tonight. To me, this might be Taysom Hill.
Oh, I don't know how you don't start Taysom Hill. I have Taysom Hill right behind Travis Kelce rest of season among tight ends. And honestly, that's probably too low. He should probably be ahead of Travis Kelce because he allows you to play Superflex if your league is not Superflex. Mm-hmm. That's the whole key here. Again, I already mentioned it earlier, but Derek Carr had completed 40% of his passes in the red zone, which was the worst rate among all quarterbacks up until 2 weeks ago. And the Saints finally got it to their head and said, screw it. We can't live like this anymore. Now they just take him out of the red zone. That's why Taysom Hill the past 2 games has 12 carries inside the 20, 6 carries inside the 10-yard line. This past week, even both a receiving and throwing touchdown inside the 5-yard line. And the funniest part about it is that Juwan Johnson became like an every down tight end in the same game that Taysom Hill leads them in everything. Juwan Johnson ran a route on 71% of dropbacks this past week because they don't use Taysom Hill as a tight end, but he is listed as a tight end. So yeah, you have to start Taysom Hill.
What about this situation that Jim Parsons Jr., JPJ, is facing? Taysom Hill, Jake Ferguson, and Trey McBride. He can only pick one of those guys. You got Ferguson against the Giants. You have McBride against the Falcons.
Ferguson's so good too.
And that's the thing. These are all 3 great options for top 12 tight ends this week.
Oh yeah, but again, what Taysom Hill provides, the fact he can score 3 different ways, and he's being used in the most important part of the field, you have to play him. Like, you literally have to. No one else can provide a ceiling. How often do we get excited about a tight end? All because they're running a lot of routes, and it doesn't come to fruition because at the end of the day, they're a tight end. Taysom Hill's not that. He unlocks an entirely different part of the game.
Who would have thought a 59-year-old tight end from BYU or wherever he's from would be having this kind of an impact on fantasy football?
Without Sean Payton, too.
Sean Payton,
it wasn't Dennis Allen who got him. It was Sean Payton. To speak more on Jake Ferguson, though, because he is such a good play, the way the Cowboys play offense now, the offense runs through CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. Even these past 3 weeks, CeeDee Lamb has been basically a 50-50 boundary or slot receiver. I don't know why it took him until 2023, like the final year of his rookie contract, and in week 7 for it to click. But they finally started moving him around a la Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the best receivers in the league, because that's what CeeDee Lamb should be. And that's why he's seeing over 35% of the team's targets in this span. That's why he's just murking everyone that tries to defend him. Not only that, but now the Cowboys these last 3 weeks too, they're passing the ball at the league's 5th highest rate when they have an 8+ point lead. They don't even run the ball anymore because they say we are going to function through Dak Prescott, and he's been a top 3 quarterback in 3 consecutive games now. So now, like, it's just those pieces, Ferguson, are great. Don't get me wrong. They're amazing. It's just that they're not Taysom Hill.
The other issue that we're facing, and I know we talked a lot about Deontay Foreman here, John. Alexander Mattison is going to be in a backfield without Cam Akers for the first time in whatever it's been, 3 weeks or 4 weeks after Akers ruptured his Achilles. Is what we saw from Mattison this past week. Does that give you the comfort of enough volume that you would say, okay, I'm going to play him over Foreman tonight? Foreman, who's going tonight? Is it enough? Have you seen enough from Madison to want him to play to want to play him over Foreman? This is from Jim Parsons Jr. as well. Madison, by the way, this week is taking on the New Orleans Saints, obviously at home.
The usage from this past week, no. But the usage from the first 3 games, yes. So, for reference, the Saints defense over the last month has started leaking production to running backs. Devin Singletary averaged 4.8 yards per carry on 12 runs. Travis Etienne scored 2 touchdowns. JT and Zach Moss combined for 7 yards per carry. And Deontay Foreman, we saw just last week, reached 83 yards. Tyson Bagent also 70. And the 3 games to open the year without Cam Akers, Alexander Mattison recorded 85% of the team's running back carries, 81% of their backfield touches, and also averaged a 12.5% target share. So the stars are actually aligning for Alexander Mattison too. I've had such a hard time in the very, very, very few teams. I have basically no Madison because once Dalvin Cook was cut and Madison jumped from a 9th round pick in FFPC best ball all the way up to 4th or 5th. I thought that was the worst process to have for a running back who does not fit in the buckets of drafts of guys who deserves to be in that pool of players in the top 5 rounds. It just doesn't work like that. You can't force guys into those roles when they have never been given those roles for that reason. But I would say this is finally the week. I think Madison is closer to a top 16 running back more so than any other week this year.
All right, let's go. And by the way, I agree with you on, and that's good knowledge on Madison, not only Madison, but the changing New Orleans Saints defense that we're seeing over the past couple of weeks as well. Let's go to Thorbear, who plays in a standard league, non-PPR. You're looking at Deontay Foreman. You're looking at Tank Dell and Christian Kirk. Again, non-PPR here. When you're looking at these players, Christian Kirk has been one of my favorite players. Last season, continuing into this season, I was not a Calvin Ridley guy, and I really like him. Now, I don't play in any non-PPR leagues. Maybe I should join one for next year to just try to get my feet wet in it because I haven't played in one in 15, 20 years, whatever it's been. Christian Kirk to me and Tank Dell in a non-PPR are below Foreman. I'm going to play Foreman tonight.
I'm going to play Foreman tonight too. And it's mostly because Zay Jones is coming back this week. And remember, the last time we saw Zay Jones at full health, week 1, he started in 2 wide sets over Kirk from the boundary, recorded a 21.7% target share, the second most on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Week 2, he only got through 2/3 of the game, but he still could have had 2 touchdowns. He dropped them because he's Zay Jones. Either way, he plays on the boundary in 2 wide sets. So I worry a little bit about Kirk in this spot. I'll be curious to see their usage with Jones back in the mix.
Let's get into our break that is going to separate hour 1 and hour 2. When we come back, Dabo, we're going to answer your trade question. Alex P. Keaton has a lineup question, and we're going to find where John Daigle stands on certain players in the NFL, like Aaron Jones, like Will Levis, Gardner Minshew, we're going to get into as well.
Oh, yeah.
John Daigle from 4for4.com. You follow him on the X Machine at NotJDaigle. I'm Eric Balkman at Eric Balkman, the FFPC High Stakes Lowdown, High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on BSN rolls on right after this. Don't go anywhere. We're just minutes from kickoff.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. It's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria. Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Back! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush, you were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no!
on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Seven minutes past the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network. Fantasy football night in America, less than 10 minutes away from kickoff of the Carolina Panthers and Chicago Bears. You can have your 3-screen experience going on tonight as we will take you into that game. You can watch the first quarter with us here as well as on the BettorCast, which you can download free in the App Store and Google Play. The FFPC Weekly Challenge is here for Week 10 in the NFL. There is no draft, no salary cap, no convoluted rules. It is the exact same format as our popular FFPC world-famous playoff challenge. You can play in a 10-team league, a 30-team league, and a 100-team league if you want. Pick your players, let them ride for the week. The results are determined by the total points accumulated by each individual lineup entry. You can play it with the classic format with kickers and defenses or the slim without. $35, $200, those are the price points. There's a contest for everyone. New users will get $25 off their first entry of $35 or more at the FFPC. Just use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com, ALARM at myffpc.com. Let's get into this question that Alex P. Keaton had before the break on YouTube. John Daigle, by the way, from 4for4.com, joining me on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show tonight. Check out his work at 4for4.com, as well as at NotJDaigle on the X Machine. Jake Ferguson or Tony Pollard in his flex. This is a non-tight end premium league. He also has Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, and Josh Jacobs. Congratulations on that squad of running backs there. That looks really good. If he has the opportunity to play all 4 running backs, should he do that? Or does Ferguson sneak in there for you, John?
Tony Pollard over Jake Ferguson for me, and I'm looking at the other running backs. I think you still play all of them personally. The only one I'm concerned about, but I'm not concerned enough to bench him just yet, is Alvin Kamara. We've talked about the Saints a lot on this show and what Taysom Hill's doing, and really that's because what's happening now is he's taking away from Kamara. That's certainly concerning for Kamara's future, not to mention Jamal Williams also getting in there for a handful of touches too. And so that's why Alvin Kamara handled his lowest share of backfield touches since he returned, but I'm not there yet. So yes, Pollard for me in flex. And it's been bad for Pollard against good teams. Going back to last week, we knew it was going to be a bad game. The Eagles haven't allowed a single running back to go for over 60 yards. No, Tony Pollard was never going to get there against Philadelphia, so I don't even care about that one. We at least know he's averaged 18 fantasy points against defenses that DVOA from from FTN Fantasy ranks below average. So he's still getting there in plus matchups. This is a plus matchup, so I'm playing Tony Pollard.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I'm with you 100% on that too. Dabo is in the YouTube chat right now. He has a 10-team PPR league where he's talking about Saquon Barkley, Michael Pittman, and Gus Edwards for CeeDee Lamb. He has his team posted there. My opinion on trades like this, John, you're always trying to get the best player in the deal. Barkley, Pittman, Edwards for Lamb. Lamb, to me, is the best player in this deal. It's a 10-team league, so you got to believe that waiver wire is going to be your friend over the course of the next few weeks. Your premium talent or elite talent over everything else. Barkley, certainly you could make the case like, a bell cow running back, but how valuable is Barkley in a non-Daniel Jones, a non-Tyrod Taylor, a Tommy DeVito offense that's kind of neutered right now? If I have the opportunity, I'm trying to get Lamb. If I can get this deal done, I want the Lamb side of this.
I completely agree. I mentioned it earlier, but out of the bye now, the last 2 weeks, CeeDee Lamb, 41% and 36% of the Cowboys' targets. They've just figured it out. They've unlocked him. And so, like, if he finishes the year as a top 3 wide receiver in points per game, that'd be the least shocking thing to happen, especially like considering the schedule the Dolphins have coming up when you consider Tyreek Hill among the top 3 options. So I agree. Yes, I want CeeDee Lamb for the fantasy playoffs.
Let's find out where you stand on certain players here, John, and we'll kick things off in Atlanta with Bijan Robinson. And I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is the Arthur Smith effect on any Atlanta Falcons player. This is a player that was drafted, and I can't remember who had this. I think it was Mike Clay. I originally saw it from ESPN. Players who have running backs who are drafted with this kind of capital almost never miss in their rookie year. They almost always put up buku numbers, and they return fantasy value for you, proper fantasy value for you, and where you have to draft them. Bijan Robinson, as of late, has not been great. Also from ESPN, Field Yates had a litany of running backs that had more goal-to-go carries heading into Week 10 of the fantasy football season than Bijan Robinson. A couple weeks ago, I would have said, you don't even think about it. You're still playing Bijan Robinson every single week as far as your season-long competitions go. But as it goes on, and I don't know if this is the right week to bench him, but, man, when you're at full strength and you're not dealing with buys or injuries or anything like that, I think you could start taking a long, hard look of maybe Bijan Robinson is not the answer for me in my fantasy team this week. Where do you stand on Bijan Robinson, John?
I agree with your sentiment. It's complicated since you are now factoring in coaching and what that coach will do. Even the reasons I've heard given this week from a lot of people that I consider sharp and I trust, there's not any data behind it. It's all coming down to the fact that they think that there's enough pressure now where Arthur Smith will play him eventually. And I just can't get behind that reasoning because that doesn't make sense to me. Why would he care? He hasn't cared to this point. Why would he suddenly care now? So I still worry about Bijan. I think there are enough bye weeks right now to where maybe you don't even have the question. Maybe you just have to start him. You suck it up and you hope. That's not a strategy, but that's kind of where we're at with Bijan. So it's not his fault. It's he's one of the most talented running backs in the league. It just comes down to Arthur Smith, and that's something we can't answer, honestly.
We can't, and that's frustrating. And
that series, whenever Dobbs fumbled, his first fumble, I believe it was, and then the Falcons ran it back into the 5-yard line, and they had 4 plays, and it was an incompletion, and then it was Jonnu Smith goal line carry, and then Tyler Algier getting stuffed the next 2 carries for -4 yards. It's like, what are we doing here? Right. What are we doing?
I don't get it.
Malpractice.
Total malpractice. The hottest waiver wire pickup in many FFPC leagues this week was Baltimore Ravens running back Keaton Mitchell. Yeah. There are a lot of people that have been talking up Keaton Mitchell even before the season started. I know Billy Musio from Player Profiler was all over Keaton Mitchell in the draft process and obviously at the start of the season as well. We saw a flash of what he could do, and I use the word flash because that's about how long it took for him to get to the end zone. The speed with him is real. It's something that Justice Hill either doesn't have or is not demonstrated to that level so far, and Gus Edwards for sure does not have that kind of speed. Keaton Mitchell offers this to the Baltimore Ravens offense, something that they really don't have from anywhere else. John, where do you stand on Keaton Mitchell going forward?
So fun. And I thought the most surprising and most important stat with Keaton Mitchell is that in the first half alone, he handled 4 touches. Gus Edwards had 4, and Justice Hill had 4, showing that it was a timeshare from kickoff. Keaton Mitchell was intentionally played, not just in blowout game script. So that's really important. Having said that, given his size and given how good Gus Edwards is, like, Tyler Algier, there is reason to take him off the field because he's been one of the league's worst goal line carry backs. He actually just brings them backwards. Alexander Madison, too, for instance, has 9 carries inside the 10-yard line. He's rushed for -4 yards. But Gus Edwards has 8 goal line carries. He scored on 6 of them. He's not getting stopped. So there's no reason ever to take Gus Edwards out of the touchdown equity role that limits Keaton Mitchell's ceiling.
Yeah.
Having said that, it is a juggernaut offense. And thus, if we think we're even going to get 8 to 10 touches weekly, for instance, like if Keaton Mitchell were healthy, I don't know if he's healthy now. He got downgraded at practice today with a hamstring. I don't know if he's going to play, honestly. And so I had to step back and say I instead had to play these other guys rather than trust a downgraded player on Thursday. It's always worrisome. But if he is going to play, I just think that game scripts are usually going to be good enough for what is historically a great team the Ravens are, both on the defense and offensive side of the ball. There will be enough blowouts to where these 10 touches for Keaton Mitchell are going to let him score more fantasy points than Chuba Hubbard at 18, Najee Harris at 20, Dameon Pierce at 18. The list goes on. Keaton Mitchell's going to be better on 8 touches. So I think that's kind of how I play him week to week.
And then I think that's the tricky thing is week to week. Like you don't know exactly what you can expect for him. Obviously, if there's an injury there, it makes things easier. But right now we're kind of waiting and finding our way through that backfield in Baltimore. Speaking of backfields, what about the one in Minnesota? We touched on this earlier. No Cam Akers the rest of the season. Ty Chandler was another popular waiver pickup this week too. And as you stated earlier in the program about Alexander Madison, this is not a pedigree guy. This is a guy that has shown us who he is, and we should not be putting unfair expectations on what he can do for our fantasy team going forward. That said, Ty Chandler was a pretty popular guy in dynasty rookie drafts last year. I know a lot of people were fans of his game, and now his game is second on the depth chart on the Minnesota Vikings. Where do you stand, John Daigle, on Ty Chandler?
I understand that we play a week-to-week game, and so I can usually step back and say I do love Ty Chandler. He's just the kind of player that if he ever gets the opportunity, he's the one you want to start every single week. 98th percentile speed, 85th percentile athlete. He comps best at his size and speed combo to Tevin Coleman and Jamal Charles. Terrific comps given speed and strong backs. Having said that, since we are playing a week-to-week game, I'm still leaning on the data we had previously and them not using Ty Chandler. And I also went back and picked up Ty Chandler everywhere this week, but this is going to be Alexander Madison's game. So I'm starting Alexander Madison this week, but I do want to stash Ty Chandler everywhere.
I think that's the important thing is this guy should not be – he should be owned in every single league we play in. He should not be out there, especially in the high-stakes leagues where you have 12 teams, 20-man rosters. That guy's got to be owned everywhere.
And I did drop him after the Cam Akers trade because we lost that out. But now that we got the out back, I was like, okay, I'll go like kind of like a Marvin Mims who I've just kind of been – like in thinner home leagues, I have dropped Marvin Mims, but I can never truly get away from him because if the breakout happens, like I'll be damned if I'm going to let it happen on someone else's roster because I've just been on top of it all year long. So he's probably just going to waste on my bench, but I want someone like Ty Chandler. That is a player worth wasting on your bench all year long because it takes one game and all of a sudden he's gone and everyone else will try to bet on him.
What about Aaron Jones sticking in the same division and at the backfield? We touched on him earlier. So for reference's sake, John, I have always been a huge Aaron Jones fan, not necessarily because I'm so close to the Green Bay Packers, but because I feel like his skill set and his production, he falls in drafts every single year to the point where I'm like, I got to take him here. And I feel like I ended up with a lot of them over the past few years, which has been good. Now he's dealt with some injuries, and obviously the injuries aren't going to go down as you get older. He's 29 years old, and certainly this season has been kind of a battle for him to stay healthy. For me, though, it's the production, it's the touches, it's the volume. If he's getting the volume, he's going to come through for you as a starter for your fantasy league. Where do you stand on Aaron Jones right now?
Based on what we saw this past week, I think he gets the volume. And it makes sense from a football standpoint because, again, the way you use Aaron Jones, it helps hide Jordan Love too. It makes life easier for Love. And so the fact we saw his season high in touches with 24, season high in share of backfield touches at 63%, and a 24% target share, both short term against the Steelers defense that is allowing the 6th most yards per carry to opposing running backs, and long term, if we think they have to use Aaron Jones this way in order to make life easier for Love, I think he's an amazing player to buy for the second half of the season.
Where do you? I meant to ask you this before with in regards to Alvin Kamara. For dynasty purposes, if you get an offer for a random first-round pick, do you hop all over that and get rid of Kamara at that point?
I did. I was trying to do this live. I don't think I'm going to have enough time to look up the trade live, but I did have a tanking dynasty team, and I believe I traded him for a 2024 first and a 2025 third. I think that's the going rate.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
But for sure, but if there's a winning team out there, you can definitely part with him for a 2024 first. Yes. And I'd be totally fine accepting that.
All right. Fair enough. Let's move on to Jerome Ford, Browns backfield. I was a little bit nervous for two reasons. The presence of Pierre Strong, the signing of Kareem Hunt. You throw in the fact that he was allegedly dealing with a high ankle sprain the last week. And I didn't know how much use that the Browns would get out of him. And yet, lo and behold, he looked really good in comparison to what he was asked to do to Pierre Strong and Kareem Hunt. I feel like he blew me away. I did not expect him to be as involved as he was. Where do you stand on Jerome Ford? After that game, John Daigle, where do you stand on Jerome Ford now going forward in that Browns backfield?
It is an impossible spot to expect him to do anything against the Ravens. Let me preface it with that. I'm not high on him this week, but I was really encouraged, actually, by his performance this past game because behind the scenes, he still handled 54% of their running back carries, 20, 58% of their backfield touches, 25, and had a 25% target share. Also ran 22 routes to Kareem Hunt's and Pierre Strong's combined 9. So he was the only pass-catching back, honestly. So given that role, I think moving forward, Jerome Ford is going to be an awesome RB2. It's just not going to be this week against this Ravens defense.
Yeah, you got to bite the bullet this week.
Yeah.
Bench him if you can. I know in some spots, because of all the bye issues, I may have to play him. But
and honestly, like the players we want to play are the Jerome Fords, Antonio Gibsons, like the guy who can get there on their receptions because it's so much easier to do so, which is why it's always hard to bite the bullet with Deontay Foreman. I always struggle to get his start sits right because he's not a pass catching back. And it's so much harder for those guys to get there.
It's a great point. Quentin Johnston is a player that many people were excited about after rookie drafts. And then leading into the season, when Mike Williams got hurt, we thought, okay, now this is going to be the time that Quentin Johnston comes to the forefront of fantasy. That didn't really happen. Then Joshua Palmer got hurt. Now he's on IR. Is this Quentin Johnston's time, John? Where do you stand on Quentin Johnston going forward? Again, playing in a game this week that has a pretty high total, 48.5, I think, is what we touched on before with the Lions and Chargers. What about Quentin Johnston this week and quite frankly beyond?
I think it's a pretty good spot for Quentin Johnston. I know a lot of people are very upset at him because he's performed poorly so far, but remember, he was only a rotational player, and just last week did he finally lead the team in routes run around a 95% of dropbacks, and I thought that was amazing. And I couldn't believe the anger people had against the Jets defense, a Jets defense that has allowed nearly 5 fewer fantasy points per game to enemy wide receivers than the next closest defense. They shut down everyone. So who cares what Quentin Johnston does? You didn't expect him to have a good game anyways in place of Josh Palmer. So the fact he had the usage behind the scenes, that's what I'm excited about. Not only that, but we touched on it earlier, the past 2 weeks now, because they have no one going downfield, Justin Herbert has this low ADOT that was mentioned earlier. Tommy DeVito's throwing deeper than him, but that's good quietly for Quentin Johnston because Johnston is actually like coming from TCU. He was one of the nation's worst downfield receivers. It's like Chase Claypool, where that's not how you use him. You need to use him on sweeps, end arounds, and get him shallow targets over the middle of the field since he averaged 7.7 yards after the catch per reception. He's big Brandon Ayuk. And so the fact now that they're also using the receivers close to not going deep, I actually think it helps Quentin Johnston in the second half of the season. So I do like him a lot while Josh Palmer's out.
Let's go back to the YouTube chat, John. We haven't talked about the Texans receivers yet because there's a situation going on there. Number one, War Eagle 20178. Jamar Chase or Noah Brown. I know to start Chase, but I have a feeling he won't go full on Sunday because of his back. This is going to be real simple for me. You play Chase if he's active. If he's not active, you play Noah Brown. But what about Chris Lude's question? Tank Dell over Jordan Addison this week. And knowing that, and I haven't seen the practice report, I don't think Nico Collins practiced today. But this is an interesting situation we have going on in Houston.
Nico Collins was a DMP today. And if that's the case, I think I play Tank Dell, since even with Nico Collins active, Tank Dell has led the team with a 20% target share in the 5 games he's played. And he's actually rendered Nico kind of useless, a 16% target share when they've played together. And it's really only because, like all the guys we talked about earlier, Nico gets so many off-target boundary targets that it's just hard for him to get there. He needs to get easier layups, and he doesn't get any freebies. So I would still consider Dell the better option, assuming Nico Collins is ruled out. But it's a good question.
If Collins is out, Dell is the play over Jordan Addison then this week?
I think so personally, yes.
Okay. All right.
It's really close.
Right. And I'm with you on that.
And I already talked about whenever Dobbs came in, it was TJ Hawkins who had a 41% target share. Jordan Addison was next up with a 15% target share.
Yeah. And that's something we're going to have to be aware of
really
going
close.
forward, for sure. What do you make of George Pickens right now? A player that has a lot of talent. And we might have even touched on this earlier too. A guy who runs a lot of 9 routes, right? I mean, a lot of flies. This past week, 5 targets, 2 catches for -1 yards. Previous week, 5 targets, 1 catch for 22 yards. It ended up being a touchdown. I am breaking ties, I say, in my weekly lineups against George Pickens right now. Feel like I got to see more from him based on how his last couple of weeks go before I start trusting him into my starting lineups. What about you?
Oh, yeah. You can't trust George Pickens. Again, it's not a Pickens problem. A 28% target share in the 4 games Deontay Johnson was out, back down to 21% with Deontay. Also in the last 2 weeks, 15% target share because Deontay's back at full health. This is not a George Pickens problem. And I doubt his usage will change. So I'm not trusting Pickens at all anymore.
Yeah, you can't until you see it.
Even like everyone complained about his touchdown, and trust me, it would have been great if he scored that touchdown. It was his fault; he didn't drag his toe. But even if he scored that, he would have jumped from the wide receiver 91 to the wide receiver 40. You would have still been pissed off. So just don't even worry about it. Don't start.
Right, that's a great point. We have not talked quarterbacks at all. Let's talk about Brock Purdy here for a second. A guy that we're starting to see. This guy looked like a world beater, right? Especially last season. Wouldn't turn the ball over at all. Now he's turning the ball over. And I've heard other people talking about potentially him losing his job to Sam Darnold if this continues. They had the week off this past week. They can regroup. And now they're playing this week, not only with Brock Purdy with a fresh mind, but he's going to have his receiver Deebo Samuel back out there as well. Where do you stand on Brock Purdy, John? And this is important to me because I have Purdy on a lot of Jalen Hurts teams. So he's playing for me this week.
Oh, we talked about it earlier too. I love Brock Purdy this week. Again, the Jaguars have been overestimated. Their defensive metrics compared to what they're doing behind the scenes doesn't add up. They are clearly, I think, a team to fade in the second half of the year. And it's going to start this week because they can't get pressure, 25th in pressure rate. They can't sack the quarterback, 26th in sacks. And here comes Brock Purdy. Despite those turnovers from a clean pocket, he still leads the league in yards per attempt to completion rate. I think they just put it on the Jaguars this week. It's an amazing spot for Purdy.
I'm with you on that too, for sure. Obviously, because I'm playing Purdy in all my leagues.
Yeah.
Get back to the Will Levis thing that we talked about earlier. We know that he is in a great spot to put up fantasy points this week. He's already been named the starter for the remainder of the season in Tennessee. I feel like it'd be nice if you can get Treylon Burks back out there, but we wish him well in trying to get back from that concussion. That was a nasty hit that he took.
Yep.
When you talk about Will Levis the rest of the season, is this a guy who's going to threaten to be a top 15 quarterback? Where do you stand on Will Levis?
Gosh, we need him to be good. We need him to be good because of how bad other backup quarterbacks are now. And when you watch Will Levis play, it's so much fun. He resembles rookie year Josh Allen in that he can make anything happen anytime he's under center. And that's not even a good thing. Like, you don't know what's going to happen on every snap with Will Levis, which makes football fun again. Having said that, I do think it's going to be a tremendous situation because not only do they have the running game, I think he's going to open up Derrick Henry's boxes because Derrick Henry's still playing a top 5 rate of 8-man box this year because everyone knows we're just not going to let Derrick Henry run on you. And previously they could do that because Ryan Tannehill wasn't getting it done. Will Levis is getting it done. So I think he's going to make life easier for everyone. I love this short-term spot, and I do think he can work his way as to as you mentioned, top 16 quarterback in fantasy, rest of season, middle of the road QB2. He doesn't offer rushing floor, so it makes it harder for those guys to get there. But definitely, I think he can squeeze in around there.
I don't know if there is a camera crew hanging out with Gardner Minshew in Frankfurt, Germany. But man, the social media team for the Colts are missing out if they don't have a camera crew going around with Gardner Minshew in Frankfurt. I think it'd be so compelling. But getting back to what's going to happen on the field this week, man, Minshew better be ready to get rid of the ball quickly. I think he could have a good week, but it's kind of on him to see what kind of plays he's going to make under what should be a lot of pressure from the Patriots.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and my concern for Minshew is that the Patriots are 4th in the league in blitz rate, and Minshew has struggled immensely against the blitz. 5 yards per attempt, completed only 55% of his passes. I think it may be a long day for the Colts passing game. I think the wrong team is favored in that game personally. So I am not like, when we talked about Kyler Murray earlier and saying these other guys, these fringe QB1s are in such good spots, I don't think it's worth the reward of taking on the risk of Kyler. I do not say that for someone like Taylor Heineke or Gardner Minshew. I would start Kyler over that group of players.
What about the Colts skill position guys? I mean, obviously Taylor you're going to play, but what about a guy like Josh Downs? I guess we don't even know if he's going to play.
I don't think he's going to play either.
Okay. All right. So Michael Pittman, I guess at that point, you sort of have to play Pittman. You can't get too cute and sit Pittman this week, right?
And to be fair, the Patriots defense, usually that's why I use a lot of pressure stats and, how quarterbacks fare when they're not pressured, because those things are sticky week to week for fantasy football. It kind of tells the story. And when you're sending blitzers and the offensive line can't protect, it kind of tells you how the game's going to work out, honestly. And some quarterbacks defy that logic, but that's fine. We're playing a week to week game. Mm-hmm. For the Patriots, when you send bodies, it's still going to ultimately put Minshew under pressure. That's why I worry. But we have seen, without Christian Gonzalez, the past 6 games, I believe it is, like the Patriots have fallen to 10th in the most yards per attempt allowed through the air. They're not even a respectable secondary anymore because they don't have their best cornerback out there. So I would say that would help out Pittman more than Minshew, considering that Pittman is still averaging a team-high 29% target share from Minshew.
I think that I love football as much as the next guy. John, how taxing is it for you as a guy who is living and breathing, working in the industry, to have these, Europe games starting so early and then 3 more time slots? What's that like for you on a Sunday?
It's different. So I lived in LA. I lived in Santa Monica for 5 years, and it was a different beast out there because it's like a 6:30, 6 a.m. kickoff instead. But also, as I tell everyone, compared to West Coast football, now that you and I think we're both in Central Time.
Yes.
But West Coast football, though, I mean, everyone should experience what it's like for football to end at 8 p.m. on Sunday. It is the most joyous occasion in your life. Imagine that. Like, you have time for dinner afterwards. There is still so much time in the evening, whereas the rest of us are in all other time zones are getting done like around 10 to midnight. That's not even acceptable. So I will say that the West Coast game, although you start earlier, is so much better because of what time they end. I don't mind like an 8:30 kickoff. It's okay. I'm an early riser most of the time anyways. I'm one of those weird 5 to 5:30 a.m. kind of guys. So it's okay.
I get it. It makes perfect sense. Thank you for letting me into that world. And I got to go visit my uncle who lives in right outside of San Jose, just sometime in the fall, so I can experience that, because
they do open ball at AM. I'll tell you that for football.
Oh, there you go. All right,
get it all in while you're out there. Yeah,
you're giving me no need to sell me anymore. Twisting my arm is done. I'm out. I'm getting on flight, and we're gonna check it out. Coming up in the final segment on the show, Week 9 lineup. Week 10 lineup advice We're going to talk about Jalen Warren, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. We'll get into Jonathan Mingo as well. It's all coming up. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. John Daigle, Eric Balkman. We'll be back right after this.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coop A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, "Hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL." And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who, got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got
Okay.
NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there.
There you go.
NHL 12, I think, was the start of the new consoles for me. But the big one, the holy grail of NHL games, NHL 94
Oh, there
for
you
the
go.
Sega
I mean,
Genesis
there.
right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
No, let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta. It didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
You don't even
then
need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version.
digital version.
Any
And
of
then you
that.
got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to
Oh,
be
yeah.
always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
We've got breaking news out of Chicago. There is a game going on there that's no longer scoreless. The Carolina Panthers have taken the lead on a punt return for a touchdown. And I'll be honest with you, John Daigle from 4for4.com, I do not know. I've never heard of this punt returner before. Smith Marset. I don't know. I don't even know his first name, but it was a 79-yard touchdown.
Amir Smith Marset.
There you go.
He started out. You'd have to fact check me here, but I believe he was drafted by the Vikings and has kind of journeyed to the Panthers since then.
All right, so I'm looking at this right now. Drafted by the Vikings, 100% correct. 5th round pick in 2021.
Yeah.
Caught a touchdown that year. Cut in August of 2022 after the Vikings acquired Jalen Reagor. Weird. Okay. And then the Bears claimed him. Oh, so this is actually a revenge game. The Amir Smith Marset revenge game tonight.
Lots of revenge. Deontay Foreman, DJ Moore. Lots of revenge tonight.
So the Bears claimed him in September of 2022. He was waived a month and a half later. The Chiefs signed him to the practice squad. He got elevated to the active roster for the season finale against the Raiders, and then won a Super Bowl, obviously, when the Chiefs beat the Eagles. So he's got a ring. And then signed a reserve future contract in February. He was then traded to Carolina in August in an exchange of conditional 2025 7th rounders.
He's one of those guys that kind of competed with Shi Smith earlier this offseason. But those guys that they usually don't make it. It's good for them to make it on special teams, like Xavier Gibson for the Jets. Like good for him.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. How about that? So 7-0 Carolina. The Bears are back out there. 5:46 to go in the first quarter. Bryce Peak is watching us on YouTube right now. Hey, guys, should I trade Raheem Mostert for Bijan Robinson? I already have Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Waddle, trying not to have 3 Dolphins. Well, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. But at the same time, if you can not get rid is the wrong term. If you can unload Raheem Mostert right now and get Bijan Robinson, ahead of Devon Achane coming back, which we think is going to happen next week, right, John? I think that at that point, this is a massive upgrade for your squad.
Yeah, given their bye weeks for Achane and Kyron Williams for the Rams, it just kind of works out to where the moment they're eligible to return, they will return. Kyron will be week 12, but Achane will definitely be this week since he's had 5 weeks now. So, yep, I think Achane comes back. So, yeah, I agree. Mostert, remember, was still a top 5 running back in points per game alongside Achane. They were getting it done, but they also have a pretty tough schedule the rest of the way. They play the Jets twice still. They have the Titans run defense, the Cowboys too, and the Ravens in week 17. So not a bad time to offload Raheem Mostert.
What about and let's go into the lineup advice here with some start sets. We've been answering most of the program tonight. We're going to keep going with it. Let's assume tight end premium FFPC here, John. Hunter Henry or Cade Otton, a couple of guys that have had flashes the last couple of weeks. Otton, again, gets the Tennessee Titans defense this week at home. Hunter Henry is in Frankfurt against the Indianapolis Colts. You can only play one. Who's it going to be?
It's so Henry has the better matchup, but you have more faith still in Cade Otton because the routes have been there. Otton has run a route on over 80% of dropbacks in every game since week 3. The problem was that he wasn't earning targets on those routes. But now the last 3 weeks, 14.5% target share, 15.5%, and then this past game, a team high 30% mark. So he is now finally earning the targets to go along with that volume. So I think the answer is Otton. But it is a good matchup for Henry because without Devontae Parker, what they did was say, okay, we don't have any healthy receivers, so we're just going to run 2 tight end sets. And Mike Gesicki led the team in routes run. Hunter Henry ran 1 fewer route, but still came back into our lives with a touchdown as a fantasy option. So they are actually both good options this week. But I think given the environment and we think the Levis-led Titans are going to score, it's probably a good environment, despite what the total says, for the Bucs passing offense.
Okay.
You just saw how I usually work out those situations in my head live on the spot, by the way.
It's just I see the smoke and the gears and everything.
Yeah.
It was
the hamster wheel's always running. Yeah.
The hamster wheel's always running. Quarterbacks. I think this is an interesting one because one of these guys in Trevor Lawrence has been, we think about where he was drafted. We think about his performances this year. We think about his supporting cast. It's all very, very good, right? He gets the Niners this week. You have already been outspoken on how you think that game is going to go. Spoiler alert, not well for Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Would you play Sam Howell over Trevor Lawrence this week? Howell, who's got to go to the Pacific Northwest to take on the Seahawks in Washington.
Regardless of the spot for either quarterback, the fact is that Trevor Lawrence has been bad in fantasy this year. That's kind of where I settle on starting Sam Howell over him. Lawrence doesn't have a single finish inside the top 10 quarterbacks this season. He's been like a low-end QB1, basically a QB2 all year long, just a floor play, kind of like Kirk Cousins was last year, someone who doesn't offer a ceiling. So it's not really someone I'm attracted to, whereas Sam Howell in 4 of his last 5 games has been top 10, but also has a 2 top 6 finishes and 1 overall QB1 finish in that span. So given the volume we talked about with Howell leading the league in dropbacks per game, I think Howell's just a better start over Trevor Lawrence pretty easily.
Yeah. And I'm with you on this. Like
you have to remove the name value from your head because again, we're in week 10. What we drafted does not matter anymore.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Let's see, Demario Douglas or Jackson Smith and Jigba. No, let's I skipped one. I'm sorry. James Cook or Jaylen Warren. Battle the running backs here. Cook against the Broncos, Jaylen Warren at home against the Green Bay Packers. Warren, I think, has become the Steelers running back you want to play over Najee Harris. James Cook, if I'm going to play a Bills running back, it's going to be him. But at the same time, you got to have lowered expectations based on what we've seen from the Bills and James Cook lately.
And yet again, just like last year, the Bills are just so unhappy with their running back room. This is why they're always rumored in the offseason, too, to draft a running back with high capital because they just hate their running backs. Once again, just like last year, their running backs are bottom in the league in touches per game. They just don't want to give it to them. Also, it's the way the offense functions with Josh Allen. You don't need to use your running backs. I think the spot is better for James Cook personally, but it is it's tough, honestly. It's a really thin question because I really don't like either option. What about you?
I think that you have to look at the standpoint of like, okay, so the Packers, talking about Warren, the Packers have a situation where they play a lot of 2 high safety, right? Sometimes 3 high when they can do it. And that opens you up to a lot of it closes out the big play possibility for the most part, but it opens you up to a lot of like dink and duck, death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Where you have a situation where Jaylen Warren not only is successful in the running game, but he's catching passes as well. James Cook, I feel like Jaylen Warren is getting the volume that we hoped James Cook was going to get, and he's not getting it. Denver defense is coming on at this point. For me, I'm going to lean towards Jaylen Warren here. I mean, this is close, right? I mean, we're picking at nits.
It's very close, and that's why I asked you, because I don't hate it. Like, that sounds good.
I would lean Warren here.
Warren probably is the better start, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now let's get to Demario Douglas or Jackson Smith-Njigba, a pair of rookie receivers. Douglas, who's taken on a bigger role so far this year, or recently this year, because of the injury to Kendrick Bourne, and then Jackson Smith-Njigba, who, by the way, Metcalf and Lockett were out on the field last week, and Smith-Njigba led them in receiving this past week. So this is another tough one. Douglas, obviously in Germany. Smith-Njigba is in Seattle again at home against the Commanders defense. I don't really know which way to go on this one because I don't know if the Smith-Njigba thing from last week was a one-off or is this a preview of things to come, because we've seen rookie receivers come on at the end of their rookie seasons and really make a difference, John.
And over the last month of the season, since they came back from their bye, Seattle is a top 10 team in 3 wide sets. They are trying to get him involved more. And we talked about how good the spot is. Just the fact that in their first game without Chase Young and Montez Sweat, this was a Patriots offense problem. It was not a Commanders defense thing because the defense did nothing. 23% pressure rate, 1 sack. Again, before that, through week 8, the Commanders pressured opposing quarterbacks on 36% of their dropbacks. So they got significantly worse. And now here comes Geno Smith, who has turned the ball over a lot, but is still 6th in the league in yards per attempt from a clean pocket. So to me, it's a start all the dudes spot in Seattle, and that includes Jackson Smith-Njigba, who has the significantly higher ceiling than Demario Douglas. Like I know we're attracted to what Demario Douglas is doing now, but he's still a possession receiver. That's why he hasn't top 60 receiving yards or scored a touchdown in any game, because he's like a lot like Michael Thomas, to where he's closer to droppable than he is like winning your league.
I want to go back to YouTube here, and Connor LaRose actually has a full PPR question here. He's got to pick 3 of these guys. He's got Drake London, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Sam Laporta, and Dalton Kincaid. Now, Laporta and Kincaid are interesting if this is tight end premium, and maybe they're still interesting if it's non-tight end premium. Because when you talk about Drake London, we've complained about Arthur Smith on the show, and we've complained about the non-usage of some of these Falcons skill position guys that should probably be a little bit better. Calvin Ridley has shown us what he's capable of, but he's also shown us some clunkers over the course of the season as well. And then you have Terry McLaurin as well. You just talked about the Seattle-Washington game. You're starting all your Seahawks. What about McLaurin in that spot? Would he be one of the top 3 here? And how do these tight ends factor into this decision, John?
Oh, yeah. I think you have to start London this week. He's already practicing in full on Thursday, and it's a sweet spot because I don't think people realize Taylor Heinicke is out there slinging it. He's averaged over 10 air yards per attempt the past 2 weeks. He's just trying to push it downfield. And finally, we're going to get London back, who's seen at least 21% of the team's targets in 5 consecutive games. Kyle Pitts is a problem. Arthur Smith is not using Bijan and Kyle Pitts correctly, but he is using Drake London correctly. Ever since London's 5.5% target share in week 1, London hasn't been the issue at all. London's been awesome since week 1. So I can't wait to get London back in my lineup now that I know he's at full health. So I'm absolutely starting here because the Cardinals defense is just so bad, especially in the secondary. 3rd lowest pressure rate. They're blitzing at the league's 7th lowest rate. They're not going to give Heinicke any pushback. So yeah, I like London quite a bit. The rest are a toss-up. I
gotta get just real quick. I think you got to get Laporta in there, right? He's got to be one of these guys.
And honestly, I think you have to get Kincaid in there too. Like, you can't bench Kincaid on this kind of usage, given that like he is the guy they use underneath to help move the chains now, and he's just soaking up everything. So I think yes, we have come to an agreement. It is London, Laporta, and Kincaid. Like, it's fun to have Ridley out there, but we've seen Ridley fail time and time again, like we've talked about throughout the show, based on the kind of targets he sees outside, deep into the boundary. And it's just not consistent week to week. So I'll take the tight ends.
Yeah, the tight ends and London. I'm with you on that for sure. Okay, another one. Mile High Luke. This is tight end premium. Not that it matters because it's all receivers here. You got to bench one of these guys: Amari Cooper, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and George Pickens. We talked about the Smith and Jigba. We want him in there. We talked about Pickens. We haven't talked about Cooper, but we did talk about Pickens. Pickens is the odd man out here.
Pickens is definitely the odd man out here. I don't want to start Amari Cooper against the Ravens, but he still has a team high 25% target share. I'll throw him out there.
I will ask you this: Romeo Doubs or Devin Singletary this week in week 10 here. Doubs against the Steelers. Devin Singletary. This will kind of depend upon what happens with Dameon Pierce, but it certainly doesn't look like he's playing this week again. Which guy would you rather trot out there in your lineup, John?
See, I have a lot of questions like that, but that one seems easier to me in that I'm going Devin Singletary. I was still encouraged by the usage, 15 to 16 backfield touches, so he's the one who's always going to be out there, and we knew it was a miserable spot against the Bucs. We did not start him unless we had to, whereas the Bengals are allowing the highest rate of 10-yard runs against them. So Singletary can get there with a couple explosive carries.
Jonathan Mingo and Juwan Johnson, we're going to eliminate that because Mingo's playing right now, so we'll leave him out of that one. Final one here, Zach Charbonnet or Michael Mayer. Now, I have a situation, and I just noticed this today when I was setting lineups. One of my dynasty leagues, 3 tight ends: Travis Kelce, Tyler Higbee, Michael Mayer. Kelce and Higbee are on bye. I have to play Michael Mayer this week. I don't feel great about it. Zach Charbonnet is a guy who we say he's behind Kenneth Walker, but the Kenneth Walker usage the last couple of weeks has been suspect at best. So what about this? FFPC tight end premium. Let's just assume that. Mayer or Charbonnet here for you, John Daigle?
I think it's still Charbonnet because, again, we've talked about how this Jets defense crushes everyone. They held Patrick Mahomes to his fewest passing yards on the season. They picked off Josh Allen 3 times. They limited Tua and Jalen Hurts. I can't imagine Aiden O'Connell's going to be the kryptonite to the Jets defense. I'm just trying to stay away, honestly, from everyone but Josh Jacobs in the Raiders offense.
I want to get to 2 other things that we didn't get to as long as we had a couple of minutes left in the show here. The Denver Broncos were on bye this past week. They are playing this week against the Bills. Yeah. Sean Payton was asked, I don't think he brought this up willy-nilly in his presser. I think he was asked about Marvin Mims, and he said he wants to get Marvin Mims the ball in the second half of the year. Now, there were many people, myself included, that thought one of either Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy would be moved at the trade deadline, thus opening up the potential for a lot of volume for Marvin Mims. That didn't happen. All 3 of those guys are still on the roster. What do you expect to see from Marvin Mims the remainder of the season, knowing that Jeudy and Sutton are still there?
I think the Broncos are morphing into more of a running team with Javonte Williams, so it makes it tough. But they did increase Marvin Mims' usage in the 2 games for their bye. He was in on a route on over 40% of dropbacks as their 3rd receiver. It just wasn't enough to get him there. Even at that time, he totaled literally -1 yards. Not good on 2 targets and 1 carry. But they were trying to integrate him more over Lil Jordan Humphrey, Marquez Callaway, the rest of that group. So I don't know. It comes down to them overthrowing Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, and I'm just not sure that's going to happen. So he's a guy I want to keep stashed, especially this week. But if it doesn't happen this week out of the bye, I'd be much more prone to finally letting him go.
The other thing I want to bring up here, and I feel like I'm glad it's the last thing because I didn't want to bring this up as long as we had like real tangible stuff to talk about. Daniel Jones tore his ACL.
Yeah.
Tyrod Taylor's still on IR.
Yeah.
Tommy DeVito's a quarterback. Darren Waller's on IR. what's the fantasy value of the Giants right now? I mean, like Barkley obviously is going to face some volume. You can start him or see some volume. You can start him. Is everybody else you have to bench with the Giants going forward until this gets cleared up?
You don't want any part of this from Tommy DeVito. Saquon Barkley leads the league in touches over the last month since he returned from injury, because that's all they can do in offense is give him meaningless touches. So you keep starting him, you cross your fingers for a touchdown, but they're a professional NFL team that has an 11.5 point projected team total this week. That's how pathetic they are. So you just can't take them seriously. You don't want any of that.
You don't want any of that, but our viewers want plenty of this. Dom Gazzetti actually posted in here, if I can find it, on YouTube, and it is right. Where did I lose it? I did lose it. Son of a biscuit. Maybe Anthony can help me out with this. Oh, yeah, here it is. Dom Gazzetti. The question everybody wants John Daigle to answer. What's your favorite local food spot?
I'm a big food connoisseur, so favorite
Which is why everybody
hard.
wants to know. No, here's the
but I will say I do the typical thing whenever friends come to visit me in town and I host. I take them to All Cheval Burgers in the West Loop. I think it is the best local burger, and like actual locals will argue because it's so touristy, but honestly, it is an amazing place. The secret is, since they're open they're open to 4 a.m. So you go and you put in your name, because they'll text you around 6 or 7 p.m. and they'll say like 2 or 3 hour wait. But then you just walk around the loop having drinks, get that text, and putter back over 3 hours later after drinks and have the burger. And it's truly an incredible meal.
What about is there a non-touristy spot that you would recommend to tourists that would come in and destroy it?
Evan Silva and I love Peace Pizza in Wicker Park. It's bar tavern pizza. So cracker crust thin kind of pizza.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. And that goes against the deep dish option that I know a lot of people fight back against, although deep dish hits the spot. My personal favorite is Indian food. There's a spot also in Bucktown called Wazoo, I believe it is, that I go to somewhat often. And then, gosh, that's why I love Chicago so much. Honestly, it's because all the cocktails and food you want, it's just endless. I started a list when I first got here, but then I got anxiety because you can never keep up with the list. It just goes on and on. So now I kind of just putter out and try everything, but those are, and the best Italian, downtown around River North, it's called Cortino's, and it is proper like Italian. It is so beautiful. The pasta melts in your mouth. You have to try there if you like that too.
There's a lot of options there, and you've helped us not only navigate the Chicago food scene, but the fantasy football scene tonight. John Daigle at @JDaigle on the X, 4for4.com. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Oh, of course. Thank y'all for having me on. Happy to join later.
Absolutely. We will be back 7 o'clock next week. Theo Greminger from the GOAT District will be our guest. Remember to go to myffpc.com. Play that FFPC weekly challenge right now. Enjoy the game tonight. See you in the BettorCast. We'll see you next week as well.